Belonging First: Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Essentials course for the mining industry. Why is belonging essential for equity, diversity, and inclusion? Presented by Andrea Carter in support of Women in Mining Canada's initiative to educate, elevate, and empower. Welcome to our second video in our video series. I'm Andrea Carter, and in this video, you'll learn why belonging is essential for equity, diversity, and inclusion, and critical concepts that might be affecting your initiatives and the ability for people to feel belonging in your organization and workplace. In the last video, I shared the importance of belonging and that one's sense of identity is important to experience belonging within social, relational, and environmental surroundings. Let's begin with a figure I've created, which you can also find in the white paper, Unrealized Growth in Mining: Upgrading the Future to Include Human Capital and Belonging. If you think of human capital, which Golden 2014 refers to as the stock of skills that the labor force possesses, it's important to remember that skills are not stagnant. Historically, human capital focused on two primary factors: education and training. Unfortunately, history shows that those who had the means to acquire education and training prospered, while those who did not were left behind. The same is true with how organizations have identified exclusive talent and how employees are included in various training and educational elements. Those who behave differently or look and think differently have primarily been excluded from the exclusive talent pipeline. Behavioral neuroscience shows that human capital is also correlated with well-being. So for those who have been excluded or have not continued to receive access to training and development, they have stagnated in their talent progression. As organizations look to build the future workers and leaders, consider the intersections of how belonging provides an opportunity for talent, leadership, and strategy to flourish and create competitive advantages. From a strategic lens, corporate equity and fairness shows talent that you are committed to creating an environment where everyone belongs, and the correlation to talent's engagement and performance then increases. From an inclusion lens, when talent are invited to participate, they are heard and seen, they feel that they belong and have a higher perception that leaders have empathy and want them to feel they belong. Finally, from a diversity lens, when organizations learn how to see differences as beneficial, adopting a belonging-first culture, diverse talent are put into the exclusive talent pipeline, are developed and nurtured, and again, this increases the perception that leaders understand, relate, empathize, and recognize talent for their autonomy and their value. What's important for talent post-pandemic is the recognition of intersectionality. Intersectionality is an analytic that is helpful for understanding the various identities of how each individual, their race, class, gender, education, ethnicity, marital status, age, ableism, sexual orientation, ethnicity, and immigration status, among other salient identities, affect how talent participate, engage, perform, and associate with belonging. Kimberly Crenshaw shared this concept in 1984 as a means to argue discrimination within the workplace. It is also of importance that these identities provide an analytic for whose voice is heard, who makes decisions, and who is valued within an organization. I highly encourage you to sit down and consider the varying identities you relate to and how those affect how you interact, belong, connect, contribute, how your level of comfort, how your psychological safety, and how your well being is affected in relationship to the places and people in groups to which you belong. You'll likely notice that some memberships easily and clearly allow you to feel a sense of belonging, yet in others, you will likely have felt excluded or highly undervalued. If we look at intersectionality through the lens of whose voice is more important and who is making decisions for others, we can see how these identities intersect and become extremely important. This will reveal a portion of how corporate culture has followed cycles of socialization to either create a sense of belonging or exclude and reject others who are different. Primarily, we have used a homogeneous model for organizational design, which is something that we're now trying to shift. In the next example, you'll see how these intersections really do affect the organizational design. So if we look at this initial example on the left, we can understand that in this specific person, we have a cisgender male who's Spanish and English speaking. He's able-bodied with a learning disability, Latinx, gay, and is the first generation to graduate from graduate school. While he is in the middle class, his Brazilian Canadian ethnicity will provide varying degrees of belonging and varying degrees of being acknowledged for his perspectives and contributions. If we are looking at intersectionality through the lens of whose voice is more important and who is making decisions for others, we can see how these identities intersect and become important. And this will reveal how some of the elements of whose voice is more important than another also get seen within the organization itself. If we compare to the next example, where we have a cisgender female who is French Canadian and speaks French and English, she is able-bodied, white, heterosexual, married, mother, grad school graduate, and from an upper-class family, her voice will also be valued in a different way in relationship to the organization. Specifically, how she is acknowledged for her perspectives and contributions will also vary. Now, neither intersection is better or worse here. It is more important to think of these intersections as they relate to organizational fit and the culture of belonging. When leaders understand how these identities affect how people perform, interact, engage, and belong, it changes the policies, procedures, and initiatives that equity, diversity, and inclusion elements are trying to foster. This last concept that I will introduce here, again, is a figure that I created and used within the white paper, Unrealized Growth in Mining, Upgrading the Future to Include Human Capital and Belonging. This is an example of collective intentionality. And this concept is really important because it explains why there is such a disconnection between equity, diversity, and inclusion and the strategy to move people forward. Behavioral neuroscience shows that everyone has the basic need to belong. Because we are human, we use language as a determining factor to create mental inferences for context, which provide understanding. As a side note, the context of language is hugely important as it pertains to Black, Indigenous peoples, and people of color, because language, specifically written language, has been a distinguishing identity differentiator that has oppressed and prevent advancement. As you consider diverse talent within the mining sector, this concept is one you'll want to learn more about. Behavioral neuroscience shows that in order for a framework to become substantially understood and used effectively, collective intentionality must exist. Collective intentionality means that a group of people agree that a concept exists and that the word used to associate with it has mental inference and meaning. While equity, diversity, and inclusion are understood to be important, their mental inference and meaning have yet to be adequately defined for strategic advancement and organizational application. So when you look at your vision and mission statements for equity, diversity, and inclusion, if you struggle to recite them or understand them, this is further complicating your ability to capitalize on the power and potential of what's at stake. For human capital to be fully realized in our new normal, and for leaders to truly build the next generation of workers for mining, equity, diversity, and inclusion are imperative, and so is the framework that provides mental inference and meaning. Leaders who want to build confidence about the future will commit to creating collective intentionality within their organization. Doing so includes defining the power and opportunity of equity, diversity, and inclusion, and not just setting disclosure targets, but rather working to understand and relate goals for human capital with a belonging first culture. How can you show your people to work together and that belonging will actually help you perform optimally? If you think about team dynamics, this is where the integration occurs between change management and performance within the talent pipeline. In our next video, How Does Belonging Affect the Talent Pipeline? I'll walk you through the 5 key indicators as they intersect with talent. I'll see you there.